Hey, welcome, Voice of San Diego, Friday 5, live at 5. I'm Scott Lewis, the CEO at Voice of San Diego, editor-in-chief. These weeks, wow. What? We got a lot to talk about. We got local politics, local state of the city speech, the first from Mayor Todd Gloria, at least the first one since he was real mayor. You remember he was not mayor before, as in he was the not mayor who was the mayor before. But this was the first one of his new term. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the COVID and the statewide politics that are of interest now. But first, of course, we got to do number one. This thing at the U.S. Capitol that happened last week, we're still grappling with it locally. We are still trying to understand it. We are still divided in weird ways about it. Let's get right into it. So this week, Darrell Issa started to respond again to more of the criticism about his particular stance on this issue, this vote to overturn the election. Here's Darrell Issa.
They're overplaying a lot of things, including the death of these people on Capitol Hill. It was a terrible event, terrible things. People need to be punished, but of course they're trying to use it to imply that there's only one side that has violence. And
you don't really want to do a but after the deaths and stuff like that. There's a lot of deaths, but the problem, but there's no but. But first of all, let's stop with the equating of like what happened this summer, because this was an attack on the Capitol intent on apparently quite violently stopping the certification of the vote and overturning the election so that the person who was elected to president would not be president. It was violence to stop the peaceful, normally, transition of power. This isn't, there were some bad things that we all have to grapple with about riots, about unrest, but this is not that. This is a completely different thing, and it's a huge thing, and it's a big problem. And you don't overthink when somebody dies in an attack like this. 5 people. Locally, we've got we have a new chairwoman of the San Diego County Republican Party. That's Paula Witzel. And Paula Witzel, this is her before she was elected on Monday. This was Paula Witzel on Twitter. She's retweeting Dinesh D'Souza, and he says, "I'm not making a threat, but rather simply stating a fact that when I say that any Republican member of the House and Senate who refuses to object in the election fraud next week is basically done." We didn't catch the whole thing there, but it's basically he's done. She done. And here's Paula Witzel, the South Bay realtor, who is now the chairwoman of the San Diego County Republican Party. On 3 days before the attack on Capitol Hill, President Trump had our backs. Had the backs of the American people for 4 years. The least we can do now is stand up for our president. We got your back. Again, we got his back in his attempt to overthrow the decision of the voters and the election. And as McConnell said, the voters, the courts, everybody reviewed this. And she was now elected to the chairwomanship of the Republican Party in San Diego County. And here is what she said in her first press release. "We believe that it's time for the nation to heal and for Speaker Pelosi and her House colleagues, along with President-elect Biden, to bring our nation together." She blasted Pelosi for pursuing impeachment. Why not unify? What? What is going on? I want there to be a strong Republican Party. I want there to be an alternative, people that are, trying to keep their own principles maintained in local city government. This is just weird. Why are we talking about this? What is happening? You don't overturn elections. That's not what we do. All right. Programming note for those of you who love the podcast. I know you're out there. We did a special podcast this week. I interviewed Travis View. He's the co-host of QAnon Anonymous, the podcast that sort of follows and debunks and explains this conspiracy theory of conspiracy theories, this sort of mother of conspiracy theories that clearly motivated a lot of the people who attacked the Capitol last week, including Ashley Babbitt, who died from my own neighborhood of Ocean Beach. So Travis View from QAnon Anonymous came on the podcast to talk to me about everything he understood and knows and has learned about that mother of all conspiracy theories. It is a cancer that is spreading in many ways, juiced by the pandemic. And it is scary. And, you know, I was following it for a while and through that podcast and other things. And I was like, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe this isn't that big a deal. Maybe this is one of those things I shouldn't obsess about, but I did. And so when you saw that guy with the horns and the fur pelt at the Capitol, when you saw that guy, Q Shaman, I knew who he was because of his podcast. And I was like, what? What? They stormed the Capitol to disrupt the certification of the electoral votes for the next president? If not to do worse, here with prosecutors who have now charged that guy, Jacob Chansley. Strong evidence, including Chansley's own words and actions at the Capitol, supports the intent of the Capitol riot, that the intent of the Capitol rioters was to capture and assassinate elected officials in the United States government. This is the Trump Department of Justice saying that the intent of these people, including that guy, was to capture and assassinate elected officials in the United States government. Chansley left a note on the Senate chamber days where Vice President Mike Pence had been presiding over the session just minutes before, warning, quote, "It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming." I mean, I think we should all grapple with what happens if those guys who storm the Capitol run into a congresswoman or a congressman or Mike Pence. What happens to those elected leaders in that circumstance? And we should all sit there with that for a minute, because it seems like, now I heard somebody today say, well, Pence is guarded by people who would shoot anybody in that sort of line of lethal force that is around him. But that's gnarly. That is a bad situation. You don't want a bunch of blood the day that the certification for the vote of president is going down. And that's how close they were. This is not a fire in some random place. This is the heart of American democracy. The most important thing it does could have been a bloodbath. You got Daryl Issa say
they're overplaying a lot of things.
They're overplaying. You don't overplay that. There's no way to overplay that. There is no overplaying of that. We will live with that our whole lives. This whole year has been a low-grade trauma, just a low-grade trauma every single day. And it's exhausting. And I fully recognize I have a charmed life. I have a job. I have a healthy family. And it's still a low-grade trauma every day. It's exhausting. We didn't need to go through this week. All right. Number 2. All right. State politics. Governor Gavin Newsom is looking at a real recall. There is a real chance that Governor Gavin Newsom is going to end up on a ballot that says, do you want to recall Governor Gavin Newsom? Yes or no? And then after that, it'll say, do you want Gary Coleman? I know Gary Coleman's passed, RIP. Do you want a porn star? Do you want Kevin Faulconer? Do you want, there's going to be, again, like 30 people who might run. That might happen. That could very easily happen. Even if they are wrong, that they only have half, that they have already half of the signatures they need. even if they don't have that many, they still have a lot. And there is a really good chance that somebody will put in a few more bucks to help them get the rest of them. They haven't spent that much money getting these. So it's a serious thing in state politics. It got so serious this week that the state Democratic Party organized a press conference to address it. And I got to call him out on this. This was crazy. Here was new mayor Todd Gloria, San Diego Todd Gloria, comparing this recall effort to what happened last week at the Capitol.
The recall does not assist that. And those who are promulgating it, those who are advancing it, are doing it with the same motivations that we saw this past weekend: to overturn a democratic election, to undermine the votes of millions of people, to sow discord, distrust, and disunity.
No, it's not. This displays a terrible lack of understanding about what happened last week. And let's just bring up a couple of other things. Todd Gloria, remember I mentioned he used to be not mayor, the acting mayor? He was that way because he and others worked very hard to remove from office legally the best ways they could through, there was sort of 3 attacks on then Mayor Bob Filner, who is credibly accused by multiple women of sexual assault and harassment. Very credibly accused, to the point where everybody pretty much, a lot of people pretty much concluded he needed to leave. There were 3 efforts launched against him. One was a recall campaign, just like this one, to collect signatures and force it onto the ballot. It was very difficult to do. The second thing they did was they pursued legal actions. There were lots of lawsuits and other things going on in the court. And the third thing that happened was continuous pressure from the media and from revelations about what happened and how it happened and who was victimized. These were extremely effective. And Bob Filner felt obligated, because of the legal situation he was in, and because of the recall campaign, and because of the pressure from the community, to resign.
The recall does not assist that. And those who are promulgating it, those who are advancing it, are doing it with the same motivations that we saw this past weekend: to overturn a democratic election.
Yeah, you do. We have these mechanisms in place in a democracy to remove from office or to take out a ballot measure or something if it was illegal or if they need to leave. That's what you do. You have this vote, and it's just not good to compare that to. One, because it's wrong, and 2, because it minimizes what happened in D.C. Again, what happened in D.C. was a major attack on democracy. People died at a crucial moment of how our republic functions. They attacked people, and they were clearly intent on harming them. So let's stop with that. Make the case for Governor Gavin Newsom. There's got to be a case for him. A lot of this was out of his hands. A lot of these, he's only 2 years into this. A lot of plans are coming. We're getting the vaccine. Everything's going to be good. There's a good chance that when the recall campaign, if it does get on the ballot, when that happens, the economy's probably going to be in a better shape. That hopefully things are better. People are going to be back in school. Hopefully, things like that will make a big difference. And you could talk about how we're heading in the right direction or whatever, but don't do that. Don't do that. Number 3. All right, I got after him, but let's talk about San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria's first State of the City, again, as the real mayor. It was really interesting speech. It was like we were listening to it at my house. It's like family fun. Oh, Dad, put on the State of the City. Okay, sure. If you're interested, I will. So we put on the San Diego City State of the City speech by new mayor Todd Gloria, broadcasting from San Isidro Library. By the way, if you've never been to the San Isidro Library, one of the most beautiful in town, great library. We had an event there last year. San Isidro Library. So Todd Gloria is making his speech, and there was kind of a few things that really stuck out for me. One, he had a really raw take on how bad it is at the city. I mean, he even got choked up talking about his own family's struggles with the virus and the economic fallout. And he was, very real about the city's economic problem. Here, for instance, here was his take on the economy, on the finances of the city.
Behind the ribbon cuttings and news conferences, the city faced structural budget deficits. I've inherited a budget deficit that exceeds $150 million and will require difficult decisions to preserve neighborhood services.
$150 million. Now, put this in perspective for a second. That's more than 1,000 employees. If you were to close the budget deficit by cutting employee costs, that's 1,000 people. Now, they're not going to lay off 1,000 people. But they're going to do what they always do, which is try to cut like positions and such. Well, we'll get into that. I have a whole budget thing. I forgot number 4. Ooh, tipped off number 4. But there was another thing that really stuck out for me with this speech. He was just real about the problems, and he was really dunking on former mayor Kevin Faulconer, just dunking on him constantly. I've never heard a speech like that where they just dunk on another politician at the state of the city like that. Now, I don't think he's dunking on Kevin Faulconer if Kevin Faulconer is not running for governor against Todd Gloria's pal, Gavin Newsom. However, I think that part of what Gloria was doing was not just trying to dunk on Faulconer, but also break with the past, right? He wanted to say, like, this budget deficit, all these problems, crazy, huh? We got to work on them. So here he was on the actual state, or here was one of his biggest digs on Kevin Faulconer.
No longer will San Diego be a place that buys indoor skydiving facilities that house no one and claim it will solve our crisis.
Yeah. The city rushed to buy an indoor skydiving facility that had gone bust in East Village from a kind of shady deal. And they rushed to buy this indoor skydiving facility to make it a place where homeless people can go, like a shopping mall of services to figure out what they need. It has never, the family health centers were operating it for a while. Now nothing's happening there. It's just a building. There was never a place to actually stay as a homeless person. Anyway, that was there. So here's Gloria's take on what the state of the city is.
Honestly, the state of our city is fragile right now.
What an interesting word. Now, I really like this speech. Again, it displayed vulnerability in the way that, like, you're supposed to, right? It shows, like, hey, we got a lot of things we got to work on, but we're strong enough to handle them, right? Like, that's how you do it. But I don't know about fragile. The word fragile means, like, I bet you they had this really big meeting where they're all going over the speech, and there's somebody advocating for fragile and somebody else is advocating for resilient, or there's probably like a big conversation about that, and somebody's really championing fragile. But I don't know what they would be saying, because fragile means like easily broken, right? Fragile. It's like it's easy to break. Well, what? Really? Are we like gonna be broken? What would break the city? And what would that look like? Like I keep picturing like a Ghostbusters style, like, opening of the streets of the city to this void. Like, I don't know what that means. I think he means finances, and that's gonna get us to number 4. All right, I kind of stole some of my own thunder, but $160 million or $150 million is a lot of money. And I don't think the San Diego City Council is quite aware of the garbage fire that is heading toward them with this situation. They've got these budget memos they put out, and I've been looking at them, and they're all like, we should give employees a raise. We should fully fund all of our homeless services, our climate action plans. We should work on adapting the streets to make it easier to ride bikes. I mean, their lists and their priorities, like they're like 7 of them were like, we got to give employees a raise, all these things. And there's merit behind all these things, but they're facing $150 million deficit. And the other thing that happened is this Gloria was right. He was handed this. The mayor has who left, he got the 6 like best years ever to be mayor with all the booming budgets they had. And the last couple of years, they covered up the deficits by getting rid of the low-hanging fruit in these civic situations, which is these vacant positions that you cut. And I spent years trying to understand vacant positions versus layoffs versus somebody's position was eliminated, but they went to a vacant position. It's wild how this works, and it's very complex. But the bottom line is it's actually very difficult to lay off people because there's so much sort of cushion built into these budgets. But what the new COO said is that a lot of that cushion has already been like squeezed out. And so let's say it's only $80 million that you have to cut or $70 million that you really have to like chop. That's still like 500 employees. So there's a big problem. And unlike the state and unlike the school districts, the cities didn't get any of this cheese from the federal stimulus plan. They got nothing. And they've lost, arguably had the most severe economic impact. So it's like a double whammy. And so the Republicans and such that didn't want to fund state and local governments in these areas have very literally put defunding the police on the table. So they stood hard against putting state and local in particular relief on in the COVID relief package that was like almost $1 trillion. Couldn't throw in like 80 billion for the cities. And that's going to have very literally consequences on the city's ability to fund the police. So they're going to defund the police. They asked the police department and the fire department for 2% recommended cuts of what they wanted to do to cut. So there's a big problem. And I think all these city council members are going to be looking at the budget that the mayor proposes, and they're going to be horrified. And they're going to be like, what about the bike lane I wanted? It's going to be bad. And that's coming. There was only one city council member that even remarked in their initial responses to the State of the City speech about the seriousness of the budget. Chris Cate, the one Republican. All right. Number 5. All right, everybody talked this week about the center that opened up near Petco Park to get vaccinations. People are lining up and trying to get appointments, mostly, though, only healthcare workers. Now, the governor this week announced that people 65 and over should be allowed to get the vaccine. But then the county of San Diego put up a big thing in red letters on its site that said, don't ask for the vaccine yet. We're not ready. It's not good. The vaccine progress, KPBS put up a graphic today, a visualization about how far we've gotten. You want to know how many people have been vaccinated in San Diego County? This is a county of more than 3 million people. 12,000 have been vaccinated fully. 90,000 have gotten the one shot. It's not going well, and it's scary. I don't know what's going to happen. We need to get some progress here. That's all I've got on that. Otherwise, everything's great. All right, let's check your comments. I hope there was no really bad ones there. Oh, stop. Leave this guy. An externalization of fake news. Okay. Don't watch. You shouldn't watch. 100. Thank you, Jeff. Not sure what that one was about. prosecutors are walking that back. I think you meant about the whether they're now the DC prosecutors are not the ones that were actually there. But yeah, I agree. I still think like what happens if these marauders encounter and they are armed, some of them are on, they're saying like hang Mike Pence, stuff like what happens if they encounter Mike Pence? Probably half of them are like, "Hey, you shouldn't do this." And then half of them are probably thinking something much worse. We have to sit with that for a minute. All right. Thank you all. Try to do something good for the community on Monday. We're trying to think. If you have any ideas, let me know. Some things we could do. I usually go to the All People's Breakfast on Martin Luther King Day that Alliance San Diego puts together. It's always a pretty good speech. But you know, it's a day to remember community. It's a day to remember what we're trying to do, what needs to happen in the community, what's wrong with the community, and why we're strong enough to fix it. So take some time to relax, but let's remember that there's a lot we can work on. All right. Have a good weekend. Should be warm. From Voice San Diego, I'm Scott Lewis. Cheers on the Friday 5 Live at 5.